Welcome. Happy Sabbath. How is everyone doing?
Well, blessed.
It is a blessing. This is a highlight of my week. You know, when we have this conversation, I'm like, Sabbath is coming, right? So
yeah,
that's a good thing. You guys are bearers of good news.
I
Glad
like
to
it,
see
man.
you. I'm glad to see you. But just in case anyone is seeing us for the first time, I want to introduce us as always. Have Pastor Josh with me, Pastor Isai, and myself, Pastor Joel. We're all colleagues and growing to be friends, working at the same conference, Texico Conference. And we have been doing this for a while already. It seems like forever, but it's been like a month-ish.
Yeah, if people want us to continue, they're going to have to get on the Patreon. This is a running joke of mine.
There you go.
But you need to get on the Patreon starting at $100 first level. And
Yes. Josh is high maintenance, so yes.
We need to keep up our high production value. That's the thing.
High production value. You see it.
Yes.
Move from our living rooms to our offices. Gotta buy a bookshelf here. You know?
Yes.
Anyways, so again, it's a pleasure to see you guys. It's a pleasure to be with everyone that may be seeing us. And again, happy Sabbath. For us, it's not Sabbath yet, but we're experiencing Sabbath and look forward to being shared with all of our fellow believers. So what's the lesson about this week, guys?
So we've been studying, and I can't even believe we're in part 8. Is that true?
We've done 8 of these.
Part 8 of this study on how to interpret Scripture.
Yeah.
And I think, as you know, we've said this before, as we've been at home longer, we want to discover who God is and what is God saying to us. And oftentimes, you know, we get this book and we're like, where do I begin, or how do I interpret this? And I think, you know, we've come at it from different angles, and this time we're starting a 2-part discussion on creation, Genesis as the foundation. And so we're going to be digging into the idea that Genesis, in the beginning of creation, God established, I mean, even before that, right? But in the beginning of the book of the Bible, God establishes so much theology, so much doctrine for us to understand and for us to realize that God has so much teaching for us and that he had already prepared so much teaching for us. I mean, if we want to just dig into that first verse, if either one of you guys, Genesis 1:1, and we're going to just go from there.
Josh, come on, man.
I can't call on Carlos or Eliab this time, so.
Right? Genesis 1:1, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, right?
All right, so right away, what are some questions that are answered right here in this verse?
Yeah,
I think it's setting up the story of Scripture, right? And it's just setting it up how, like, it's telling us that God started this all, right? And of course, we could get into some other things and stuff, and a lot of times this is probably one of the obstacles, right, for a lot of people to experience faith. Is this a true story? Is this, you know, the narrative? Is it a poetic, even though like the language is poetic here? But it's just setting us up for the story, right? It's setting us up for the story of Jesus, right? And for the whole Bible. So it's just one of the first things that we need to grapple with, and it's so good.
That's so true.
love it. I think that this can be the beginning, you know, just the beginning of the story. Some people may see the end of the story as going back to the beginning, but whatever it is, for me, it definitely shows an intent, right? That there's someone at the beginning of all of this, and that someone is going to determine what the rest of the story looks like, or at least what the big parts of the story are going to be. And I like that. And I like that it's God and not someone else.
That's so true. Yeah, absolutely. And right away for me, it tells me, you know, God, it gives God the title, or it shows God in action as creator.
Yeah.
He's a creator, and that he was there in the beginning. So clearly he was there long before that. And we see him right there. And then first thing that at least stepping into this story.
Yeah.
He's a creator. What would you say though to some people, maybe some, like Josh, you were kind of alluding to it, that some people might have a bit of a struggle to accept the story of Genesis, to accept the book. Before we, step into this study, we want to make sure that we're at least coming at it with how can we kind of enter into that dialogue?
Well, I would say this. It's okay to struggle with it, right? Even me, prior to being a pastor, and even at being a pastor, sometimes there's moments where we gotta question things, and it's okay, right? But one thing I can say about this is that the beginning of the Bible, the first three, especially the first two chapters of the Bible, they just portray this amazing picture of this amazing world that God had created, and He constantly says, and He created something, and then it says, and it was good, right? So we're created and it paints a picture that our ultimate purpose is to be in relationship with God, be in His presence, and it tells us of a greater good, right? That is, and it almost seems unattainable. And I think one of the reasons why, and it might not be something, I think it's a underlying reason why it's so hard to accept sometimes, is that the contrast of how bad our world is, right? So anything greater than this, like what the Bible describes, even in the future, right, of heaven and recreating Jesus coming back, it seems like it's almost too good to be true, right? But one thing I can say, that if we look at the life of Jesus, if we look at what He said, the way that He lived and His purpose, He's trying to restore and recreate the world to this greater good, right? So I think what people should wrestle with, of course, there's different apologetics, different things that they could get into, scientific ways of looking at it for sure. But I think in a faith way, in a spiritual way, look into the life of Jesus, right? And if He's talking about a greater good, right, that there's something, a greater kingdom, that there must be something here that is true. And I think it's one of the best approaches we can take to looking at the story of Genesis.
I love that. I think what I'm hearing is that a big source of confidence in the story of Genesis is the fact that Jesus is bringing us back to that story, right?
Yeah.
Instead of being, I like that. I think that the thing that I would add, maybe more in the technical aspect, right, is that wrestle with it and be okay with not knowing some things and not understanding some things, right? I think that when we get into difficult territory is when we try to stretch the text to say or suggest things that it's not. And I think that both, a more liberal reading or a more fundamentalist reading, both do that, right? So allow the Bible to speak for itself, get at the heart of what the author is trying to say, and don't make it do gymnastics that are not being respectful to the original intent and purpose of what you're reading. So I think that.
Oh, I love it, man.
That's really good. I really appreciate that, and thank you for that honesty and transparency to try not to fill in all the answers, but to kind of lead us into a place of honest conversation with God. So,
and I think this is kind of a silly illustration, but I have a child, and I teach a lot of things to my daughter in very, for example, there's a song to tie your shoes, right? And there's a song to go to the potty. Could it be that sometimes God does similar things for us? Could it be that through certain things like the beginning of time and the beginning of our existence and who He is and what He does, I don't know, I think that level of intellectual humility to say, hey, to God, I am like a 2-year-old for me, and He tries His best to teach me. But let me take, what if my daughter literally thought everyone ties their shoes to a song, right? What if she literally thought there was no other way to tie your shoes? It's a silly picture, but I think it matters. And I think a lot of times we forget that we're spiritual 2-year-olds. And we need to make sure we take God as what He is, a father trying to teach us something that is way beyond our capacity, you know?
That's so good. I love that. I think we don't recognize in perspective of who we are to God, that we're his children. We don't recognize our childlike nature. I guess moving forward, we've seen, we're seeing how Genesis unfolds so much teaching for us. Really, we see how, it says in the beginning. So clearly we recognize that we are created, that he's our creator, and we are created by him. And Joel, if you would read verses 3-5, I think we find some other really great teachings here for us.
Genesis 1, 3-5?
Yes.
Sure. Let me get on Google Bible here. All right. Genesis 1, verses 3-5. And God said, let there be light, and there was light. God saw that the light was good, and he separated the light from darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was an evening, and there was a morning the first day.
Okay.
All right. So I guess going off of these verses, according to the account of Genesis, are the days of creation literal days? Or what is it telling us on the teaching of the understanding of the day, creation day?
I'm seeing something here that, like, it's, of course we don't know like completely the way God creates these things, right? Like he, of course, like there's, but I see something that, because as the lesson a while back mentioned, and I don't know if we talked about it or not, but a couple weeks back it was talking about it's Moses, right? Moses is in the desert. It's believed, a lot of scholars believe that Moses wrote Genesis while he was in the 40 years prior to going back to Egypt, right? And I'm just thinking here, it's almost like, especially that part there where it says in verse 5, where it says, so the evening and the morning, right, were the first day, right? So it seems to me, at least, that it's given us literal language of being a day, right? Because it does say about light and darkness, and some of these things are like, we could take it as spiritual things and poetic things, but then he's like, evening and morning, like, we all know about that, and that was the first day. So I think it's talking about something literal here, and that's what I think here.
Yeah, I think that for me, that's part of the mental gymnastics that I was talking about before. Like, like it or not, the text is talking about literal days, right? I mean, at least it seems to talk about that. There's no other use for that word in Hebrew that would make us think, oh, maybe the author could be thinking about a symbolic day or a symbolic season or chunk of time. Every time that word seems to be used, and I'm not a specialist, but as far as what I've looked at and the little Hebrew that I can read, and it's a literal day. So take it as that and leave it as that, right? Like, does it make sense? I know that a lot of people get tripped over, well, like, how can we measure it if there's no day and night or moons and stars or sun until the third day, I think, or whatever it is. But that, again, that is not a concern of Moses. He's not trying to explain to you how can it be a day without the elements of a day. He just tells you. Why should you, I mean, it's kind of like looking at a recipe and then fighting over what kind of tomatoes should you use for tomato sauce. If it just says use tomatoes, use tomatoes. I don't know. It's just like, and I mean, and again, like, that's how I am, and some people get very agitated by that. And I would say, if you really want to get deep into that, there's a lot of, like, the Adventist Church does have a scientific branch that's called the Geoscience Institute, that really quality material by non-fundamentalist scientists that will take an honest look at science from a Christian, a creationist point of view. And so if you want to get more into that, do. And there's a lot to learn. But ultimately, no one is going to give you an ultimate answer, I think.
Absolutely. And I think a study, like, understanding that our Creator, that the God of the universe, right? He created us. He created heaven and earth, and then he created in such a organized way, because he could have literally just said, "Let earth be," and he could have easily just said, "Let all of creation be," and just the way that he organized, and we could break down each day and the pattern and what all of that. And that would be a fun study. But just to recognize that God did things in such an organized and intentional pattern. And it kind of leads us, it kind of leads me to think of course, the Sabbath. Because he created everything with an intention, and he leads up to the seventh day. And as if we recognize that, that each day was a literal day, and each day he literally, created something particular that, even when he created us, and Josh mentioned he saw that his creation was good and it was good. And then he comes down and he gets down on his knees, hands and knees, and creates man. And he creates him, and scripture says he creates him in his image. And there, again, that could be a whole nother discussion. But he creates man in his image. And I want to read it. We're going to read in Genesis 2, verses 1 through 3. And he gives us this gift. It says, Genesis 2, verses 1 through 3. It says, thus, the heavens and the earth and all the hosts of them were finished. And on the seventh day, God ended his work, which he had done. And he rested on the seventh day from all his work, which he had done. Then God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because in it he rested from all his work, which God had created and made. And there's some key things that stand out to me, but I want to ask you guys, how did the Creator expect those that he created in his image to relate to this blessed day?
I wanna mention that it's like if God's setting a rhythm, to the way that humans work and live, because God didn't set them, on Eden was a garden for sure, but he asked them, right, to tend it, to do all these, to be, his administrators of this beautiful place, right? So there was work involved, right? Mm-hmm. But then this idea of rest as well, and it's like we need to have a balanced view. And it's so awesome that God here is reminding of us of, because it's like, did Adam and Eve rest? Like, did Adam and Eve, like, did they work anything at all, or were they doing anything? And even God, did it take God a long time? Like, was he tired? No, like he wasn't. Like, but what I can see here is that God is setting a rhythm for us. Yeah. And this 7-day rhythm, right? And even like people throughout history, right? They've 10-day weeks and 8-day weeks and whatever. And what's cool about this, it's something that works and that is cross-cultural, that we need this idea, right? This 7-day rhythm, right? Of work and then rest, work and then rest. It's super cool. I love it.
I think that for me, it just adding to what Josh said, it tells me what my purpose is. I think that a lot of us, especially in the United States, are workaholics. So cool to see that the first thing, and you could argue, well, maybe there was a little bit of work done on Friday, whatever, but ultimately, like, the first full day of life is one of rest, one of enjoyment, one of communion with God, enjoying nature, enjoying spouse, right? Another human being. It tells me that, I'm not created to work. Now, it shouldn't work, but my primary purpose is not work. And to see a God that creates me to enjoy life to the fullest as my primary purpose for existing, it's such a freedom-giving thing, that I can actually live life. I can be happy. I can take a breath. I can not just be worrying all the time about money and living for the weekend and whatever it is, but I can live. That is, and I love that, right? Like you were talking about a rhythm, right? God setting that rhythm. So I like that rhythm begins not by Monday, but by Saturday, right?
Yeah. One thing, and I kind of want to ask a question here. Why do you guys think, if we look at the Ten Commandments, right? If we look at the Ten Commandments, there's all these different, different commands, right? But then there's this one about rest, right? Why do y'all think it's so important for us that God is like, y'all need to step back and rest? Like, why do y'all think it's so vital that because we know, like it seems like, oh, it's not a big deal, we can just rest whenever, but why do you think it was so important to God for us to rest? What do y'all think?
From what I like, as I'm understanding, as I see it, God created us to be in relationship with him, to be, our purpose is not to be in this constant state of hurry and rush and just constantly busy, and maybe, being even in the current environment that we live in, to be at home and feel rushed and feel overwhelmed and feel like we're supposed to be doing more, but that he actually wants us to dwell in his presence, to sit with him, to have our souls refreshed with a renewed experience with him. And the way that I see it too is that really our week is not supposed to be full of work, but it's almost like our week, it's like this anticipation of a climax being time with him, rest in him. And so I think that what he wants us for, I think what God wants is for us to spend time with him. And for as we're spending time with him, we're refreshed to continue to be able to work, to be able to press forward.
Yeah, I think I wanted to add, by the way, I'm super happy because I finally got rid of my dark side.
Yeah.
Aside from that, obviously Sabbath was given before sin, but once sin comes in, I think that, sin pushes us to abuse people, right? Like we automatically, of Adam and Eve, like sin comes and he's like, hey, you guys are going to abuse each other, right? Like your pleasure is going to be of your husband. He will want to rule over you, blah, blah, blah. The land is harsh. You got to abuse it. You got to work it, So there's a sense of like, everyone take a break, right? Everyone stop. Stop abusing each other. Stop trying to rule over each other, right? David Ashrick, when talking about the Sabbath, he talks about taking rest and extending rest, giving rest to others.
Ooh, that sounds so good, dude.
And I love it. I love it. And I think it's really cool as well if we think about it, because if those of us who are listening to us are Christians, we've put a lot of things on that bag, especially Adventists, right? Because we're very much into the Sabbath. So what Sabbath is and what Sabbath is not, what you do and what you don't. It's interesting to realize that biblically speaking, nowhere does it say you should go to church on Sabbath. Nowhere does it say,
Pastor Joel, what are you saying?
But it's true. All it says is rest and give rest.
Yeah.
Which cuts the cycle of abuse, and then we could talk about the fact that it also delivers you from idolatry, right? From thinking that you that and the other thing. But yeah.
So actually, that's a great place to lead this conversation, because I was thinking about this. As we're looking at the purpose of Sabbath, our Creator gave us this real practical way of refreshing our souls. And I was thinking the same thing, Joel. Really, the purpose that He gave it for us is rest and worship, to have that time. And I don't know if maybe you guys have some practical ideas or tips on this, but we haven't been, I guess, in the traditional sense, worshiping in a location, which I guess I mean location being the church building, because we're called to worship regardless where we're at, as far as I'm understanding. So how can we do Sabbath? Because I'm sure maybe there's still, I know that we're opening churches now a little bit more, but for those that are watching this from their living room, how can they say, I want to do Sabbath, but I'm at home? Because I think at least I can speak to maybe my experience or a couple of other conversations I've had. It can become, let me consume media, of course, let me consume as many sermons as I can. let me
sermon buffet, man.
discussions on like this, and please don't turn off this video. But how can we say, let's do Sabbath, let's continue to do Sabbath?
Yeah.
Which I guess kind of the meaning of Sabbath is to stop. Sabbath in the Hebrew is to stop, Shabbat. And that's really what God has called us to. He hasn't specifically called us to, which Jesus went to the synagogue, so it's not a bad thing to gather. But how can we still, I guess, properly, how can we still do Sabbath?
Well, I've definitely been wrestling with that. And I think y'all can relate. And y'all can relate, and then church leaders can relate as well, because often church can become kind of a burden on Sabbath, and sometimes it's not as restful. But I would say, one thing that I kind of started to think about more, and I'm wanting to really implement in my life. So I don't have it all together. Those who are watching and listening, this is kind of just something I'm wanting to do. But something that I kind of want to unplug, you know what I'm saying? Like unplug from technology, right? I want to unplug because, for example, one I would say this, and try to not be hurried, you know what I'm saying? Like, because a lot of times one thing I did this last Sabbath, we did open up one of our churches, but we stayed at the church for a while and just talked. And I put my phone on do not disturb, because a lot of people want to call me on Sabbath, right? Because they think this is the only day I work. but just unplugging. That's been something I've been doing more and more throughout the week. But I think on Sabbath, I think it's important. That's a practical approach for sure. So I was able to be more present with my church members, and I Sabbathed with them, and it was awesome. So it was really good.
I think that, I guess for me to bring the point of view of having a kid and all of that as well, like.
Yes, please. We don't get that.
Well, for example, something that we've done is paint, right? So like we the afternoon, my wife set up the living room table with newspapers, whatever, and we paint. We find paint a tree, paint something.
Can I come over to your house, bro, after this is all over?
But I guess it's kind of like, you have the gift of time, right? Like you may not be able to sit there for an hour and a half, but you have the whole day now. So enjoy yourself, right? Have a little mini date with your wife at home. Prepare a nice treat, right? Something that maybe you would, I don't know, like a dessert or whatever rocks your boat that you're not able to eat the rest of the week, right? Like the idea is to make it celebratory in a way that is not burdensome. And if there's anything, get it done before, right? Get it done on Fridays.
Yeah, for sure. Sabbath is not about a service, and it's really not. And I'm going to say something that might get me in trouble and might get people angry who are listening, but I think a lot of people, I'll say this, I'm going to take a stand. I think a lot of people are getting angry, a little hasty to get to church, because it's been all about the service. But I think this has forced us to look at, like, what is Sabbath really about?
Yeah. And I think this leads me to, I wanted to find a quote or something, but I'm going to make a real quick plug. The book, and maybe it's going to be mirrored, but it's called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry.
Yes.
By John Mark Comer. It has a specific chapter on Sabbath, actually, where it breaks it down even more, but for the sake of time, I'm just going to plug it instead of.
And I guess to add to that, another recommendation to those who like watching sermons and want to limit themselves to Adventist, Ivor Myers has a wonderful sermon called House Fires. What is actually church and where is church? And it's a wonderful pair to Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, for sure.
Fantastic. Well, I know we're running. The clock keeps running. Because
we're not in a hurry, man.
We're not in a hurry, right? We're
It's Sabbath already. It's Sabbath.
Yeah.
Zoom can't stop us.
Let's eliminate hurry. No, I think just to kind of like touch on it, if I could just briefly, some other things that we see in Genesis, the creation story, is that we see the institution of marriage and how God said that it's not good for man to be alone, and he gave woman. And Josh and I can relate that, that single life.
Single life. Let's go.
I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry.
But I think that's something that God has given to us, and without becoming divisive about it, but that it's something that is for our benefit and for our good, and it's something that that God gave to us as a gift.
I wanna bring in a question.
All right, go for it.
And the reason why is because I just listened to a message earlier today talking about marriage, right? And often, and the thing is, I'll be honest, I actually don't really like the approach of this day. I was just reading it, and it kind of began to think about how people are trying to like defend it and what's really marriage and all these different things. And I think I'll be honest, I think the writer didn't really take the right approach. I might get some people angry, but okay, go ahead and message me.
What's your approach?
They're not going to sign up to Patreon if you do that, but yeah.
Yeah, if you sign up to Patreon, you can get on that. But I want to ask you guys a question. What do you guys for? Right? I think that could be a whole other podcast. But I don't know, Joel. You're the married one here. What do you think it's for, man?
What? Sorry, I got cut off here for a second. Tell me that again.
Oh, okay. I was bringing in the question. What do you think marriage is for? Because I think the lesson kind of it began to like the approach of it was like trying to defend it, but I think approach of it began to kind of go into more of a like what it's about and stuff. But what do you think marriage is for? Is your wife in the room? Don't get in trouble, bro.
He's looking at her.
No. Honestly, in my experience, it's hard to like pinpoint a one thing, but definitely, marriage has been a sanctifying tool in God's hands.
Ooh, I like it.
I have learned about I mean this in the most honest, and this is, I have learned the most about how broken I can be and how a human being I can be in marriage. And I have been given the wonderful blessing of having a very merciful wife. So praise God for that. But I think marriage, marriage fosters a level of intimacy when you begin to know and be known. And if you're a Christian or at least a decent human being, it's going to push you to grow up.
Wow, man.
So I don't know.
Got a lot to look forward to.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah.
And I guess
oh yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm just reading the verse, right? It says, "It is not good that man should be alone. I will make him a helper comparable to him." So I think in that practical sense, what you're saying, Joel, like it's really good.
Yeah.
I was listening in the sermon, and it talked about that word helper. Yeah. That is not like a personal assistant, and sadly, a lot of us men think that, but it's the same word that later on in the Psalms and different places in the Bible, it refers to God as Yahweh is my helper. And they use the same word. So it's a cool little snippet there.
Awesome.
And I think ultimately a lot, both the Sabbath and marriage, which are God's gift to us right after creation is completed, are ways in which we can understand him better, right? I mean, ultimately, like everything about Sabbath is ultimately, hey, you have a good creator. Marriage, you have a good lover, not just the spouse, but ultimately someone that loves you eternally and unconditionally. And then you get snippets of that as you learn to love the person in front of you. And then you make a kid, and then that kid also teaches you more about God. So I think everything that is given in the story of creation is ultimately ways in which, like us nerds call it Easter eggs, right? So these are godly Easter eggs pointing you back to...
Oh man, Easter? It's a pagan.
Call it whatever you want.
Go to our Patreon.
Oh, that's funny.
Exclusive episode.
We're gonna lose all our subscribers. There you go.
That's funny, man. No, that's good. I think it's we keep seeing God's character, keep seeing God's love, in just these really snippets, as you were saying. So it's awesome. I don't know if we want to continue on to the last section or just wrap up here, but the other section that it has is the entrance of sin and God's salvation plan, and we see that. And that's a whole another big topic, but we see actually how God's plan of salvation is right there in the beginning.
Yeah. And maybe we can touch on it more next week on that, because I'm sure it's going to continue that theme.
Yeah.
But for sure, one thing I can say that in Jesus, all these different things, Sabbath and marriage, and, I think all of us, like we can experience the brokenness in the world. But in Jesus, we can experience the recreation, right? Absolutely. That He's setting everything back into order.
All I could, if I could give a little bit of homework, maybe to ourselves, and then also to those who like to watch our video. One of the founders of the Adventist Church, Ellen White, has a wonderful chapter in not Steps to Christ, Desire of Ages. The first chapter of Desire of Ages paints a beautiful image of the world that God created and how it went south. And it just gives you such a depth of the mechanics of a perfect world and how that got destroyed and wrecked under sin. And so I would say, if you guys want to be able to, not us, but people watching, get deeper into this, Ellen White, first chapter of Desire of Ages. Beautiful.
Yeah, I'm going to have to check it out too, man. I have to reread it.
All right, well, friends, thank you for joining us. Hope you have a blessed Sabbath. I hope you've enjoyed this study and to dig into it and dig into God's word and find rest in Him.
A pleasure. Had fun.
May you all be blessed.
There you go. Speedy blessing. Love you guys. Take care.